Hello and welcome to the Monday, May 19th, 2025 edition of the SANS and its Storm Center's Stormcast. My name is Johannes Ulrich, and this episode brought to you by the SANS EDU Graduate Certificate Program in Industrial Control System Security is recorded today in Jacksonville, Florida. Well, and as the last few weekends, Didier has a new version of xorsearch for us. I guess that's how Didier is spending his weekends, making xorsearch better. Fundamentally, xorsearch is meant to extract strings from files. That's sort of where the search part comes from. Of course, we have now regular expressions and all kinds of good things that were added these last few weeks. But what we got now is to manipulate the output further. You may now define a Python function as, for example, just simply is printable. You're using a -P for that. That will then filter out all printable characters, making output potentially more readable. And last week, the Zero-Day initiative by Trend Micro did conduct another Pwn2Own context. They're always attached to larger security conferences and are promising substantial money for new vulnerabilities and that are actually being demonstrated as exploitable as part of the context. The big theme here, in my opinion, was privilege escalation and virtual machine escape. There were a number of different vulnerabilities in, for example, Red Hat, Windows 11 being demonstrated. Also on the virtual machine escape front, VirtualBox and VMware were exploited. Interesting contest, they are reporting all these vulnerabilities to respective manufacturers. And I think I actually heard some browser vulnerabilities like in Firefox were already addressed over the weekend. But if they're not being actually patched within 90 days, then at least the existence of the vulnerability is made public with a little bit more detail. Now, I'm a little bit surprised that the FBI came out with a warning stating that they're seeing an increase in attempts to impersonate senior government officials via SMS and voice messaging. Now, they're not really talking about some sophisticated AI deepfakes here. These appear to be very simple scams, at least technically how they're being conducted. A little bit surprised that they work at all. On the other hand, we are seeing more and more reports about actual deepfakes being used, for example, to get people hired for jobs. Apparently, North Korea is big in that, but also to then, for example, issue engineering drawings and such with faked credentials being used in order to qualify these drawings as authentic. This is something that, of course, could have a real impact on the integrity and such of construction projects. Definitely something to consider with all of these different scams, whether it's the less sophisticated, simple SMS sort of smishing, phishing, whatever you call them, type of calls, and the more sophisticated deepfake calls. The real defense is usually some kind of business logic. Basically, how do you qualify people, whether or not they're good enough for a particular job or good enough to deliver some kind of architectural drawing or good enough to receive some money or give you an account number. Well, there have to be some business rules around this. I don't think that's solely a technical problem. If you do consider it just a technical problem, you'll probably fail because these scams tend to move pretty quickly around any kind of technical countermeasures. And researchers from Pushscurity published an update on Scattered Spider. This is a group that's mostly, simply after money. They have sort of put themselves on the map with some big attacks, for example, against MGM. One of the techniques they apparently are using more and more is the use of dynamic domain name systems. They're describing it here sort of as renderable subdomains, and that's in some ways what it is. kind of a little bit of personal interest. Before I was working for SANS, I operated myself a little system that never really went anywhere. But what surprised me a little bit is how well this still works, sort of from an attacker point of view. Actually, when I first started with SANS, we used some of the infrastructure I had for this dynamic domain name system for some of the SANS domains, and actually ran into issues where some government organizations back then blocked those particular domains because they were using infrastructure known for dynamic domain names. The big problem here is that you have these domain names. They're mentioning here it.com as one that's popular with Scattered Spider, that are well established. A lot of legitimate business and such are using these subdomains. And as a result, of course, blocking them and also just looking for anomalies here is becoming a bit more complex. One of the things to look for here is we're looking at, well, what is really a subdomain versus a domain. And there is a list by Mozilla, this public prefix list, that basically lists all of these, well, subdomains like it.com that really in some ways don't behave like a domain. They really more behave like a top-level domain, because then subdomains are assigned to different users. And if you sort of look at domains by first subtracting these public prefixes, well, that can help you get to better results looking for anomalies in your DNS traffic. Well, and that's it for today. So thanks for listening, and talk to you again tomorrow. Bye.